Hey guys, I am Leslie De Los Santos, and I'm going to be doing my oral presentation today on the article Overlooked No More by Chen, whose dances encompass the world. Um, I am doing this for class SOP 3742 of summer 2021. Give me a quick second so I can put on present, and I'm going to put my camera off just for the remainder, and then I'll come back at the end. So as I said, Overlooked No More. It is an article on Chen, whose dances encompass the world. So article summary. Uh, the article was written by Jennifer Wilson and published on May 27th of this year. So Ceylon was a dancer who was of mixed race within the 20th century. Um, earlier 20th century, around 1920s, 1930s. And she was known more for her dancing, but the reason why I chose her article was because her story was somewhat overshadowed, and her message that she wanted to send was overshadowed by the fact that she was continuously dismissed throughout her career. She was a mixed race woman, as I said before, of higher status. So she grew up in a luxurious household. She was, very fortunate to have the things that she needed. And this opened the gateway for her to become a dancer and really excel in the arts. And when she was in this field, she came to light and was aware of the fact that there were people outside of the life that she knew who she wanted to share their stories and their experiences. And she was really just brushed off and constantly looked over for several reasons. And these reasons are what I'm about to get to next. So the relevant course concepts are sexualization from chapter 6, womanism from chapter 1, intersectionality from chapter 1, and sexism from chapter 2. Sexualization from chapter 6. So the definition of sexualization is inappropriately imposing sexuality on a person, sexually objectifying a person, or valuing another for only their sexual appeal. And as I've said earlier, she was someone who had a very strong message, and she wanted to bring a new light into entertainment through dance, and really express what she saw and what she enjoyed in the joys of life outside of the, luxurious one that she lived and a lot of her audience lived through her dance and her choreography. Um, but because of the fact that she was very rarely seen as something other than an erotic uh, sexual being, because that is really what they used to describe her when they were marketing, her shows. She was an erotic being whose dance moves were quick and fly and they catch your eye, but they never spoke on what exactly her dances were portraying. Then we move on to womanism from chapter 1. Womanism is a form of feminism coined by a Black woman later on uh, after feminism was already discovered and it had, its movement. It was discovered and coined by a Black woman. And it really is just to focus on the issues that, people of color and minorities face as a whole. So poverty, racism, um, discrimination, and things of that nature. And Chen fought to bring awareness to these things through her choreography. This was what she was fighting for other people to see and really wanted to speak on. And she came about this because through her career, she would befriend other artists and other dancers, and she became aware and a bit more familiar with proletarian, excuse me, I'm having a hard time speaking, proletarian ideology. So proletarian ideology is really just the uplifting of what we know now to be the working class, um, and uplifting these people and giving them a space to speak and to say and express what it is that they go through and how, you know, they can receive support and the joys of the life that they live, you know, from day to day. That's what it is. It's just the simple acknowledgement of the middle class and what it is that they stand for and who they are and what their issues are and what their joys are. Intersectionality from chapter 1. Uh, intersectionality, in short, is the theory that, or not the theory, but the statement that we are all of countless social groups and things of that nature. And we really have, within each social group, we have our awards and we have our consequences. And as Ceylon was a interracial woman, and she looked at, she saw these awards and these consequences firsthand. So she was interracial, and she was a woman, and she was an entertainer, and that was only to name a few. And within each one of those categories, she had their subcategories, and they all had their awards, and they all had their consequences. And she really had to navigate life just working through what it is that, you know, her challenges were, because as someone who was of mixed race, especially during her time, she was somewhat of a rarity. And she was in the public eye, but she was not seen as a person, rather than an object. Uh, she was seen as something fresh, something interesting, something uh, that people could get to see and to prod and investigate instead of get to know. And this came with her intersectionality and her many categories of herself. And lastly, we have sexism from chapter 2. Sexism is the prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination typically against women, keyword typically, on the basis of sex. So through this article, for me, the most blatant and somewhat ironic form of sexism that I was able to pan out was the fact that Ceylon wanted to publish an autobiography. And she sought feedback from a friend, and this friend just so happened to be a woman. And her response was it was somewhat typical, or I could say that it was not outside of the ordinary for someone to say that during that time, but it didn't make it any less disrespectful and degrading to Ceylon. The feedback that she received was practically she was not interesting enough or important enough, or did not have a great enough impact to have an autobiography, and that she should make herself a second level character within her own autobiography and really focus on the experiences and, you know, the times and moments that she shared with other artists were a bit more quote unquote important and had a greater impact. And a lot of the times these people who she was told she should focus on just so happened to be men. And it was really heartbreaking to read that because just from this article alone, I found that she was a great entertainer and she was a great person who had quite a story to tell. And I could learn quite a few things from her, and I'm sure others can too. Future considerations. So after reading this article and from my own experiences within the entertainment community, um, I believe that we should provide platforms for dancers and entertainers to speak freely without there being a feeling of shame and judgment attached to it. Along with this, I feel like we should take sexism and ridicule that women speak on within the entertainment community, because although we are in a 21st century that is a lot more advanced, I say, and a lot more inclusive, the entertainment industry still happens to be one of those things that is extremely male dominated unless you are, you are stripped down and your talent is entirely taken away from you and all your credit is placed on your beauty and your sexual appeal. And I feel like that alone is something we as a society need to, place more emphasis on and really take care of that issue uh, from here on forward. Closing statements. Ceylon, she simply paved the way for countless people, women and men of color, to bring attention to things that really matter to them and just were unconventional, I guess, from their own upbringing and their own placement in society. She really just created a space for everyone to speak and express themselves um, on what it was that mattered to them in a creative way without there being any shame and guilt to it. And she fought for herself, and that allowed us to be where we are today in society, in terms of how we express ourselves creatively and how we view women of color and their impact and their place within entertainment. So as I said I'd come back at the end of the video. I really enjoyed reading about her. I have a background in dance, and it was just nice to see that there have been women of color throughout history that really did fight and want to make a change through it all. Thanks for this opportunity, and it was a blast doing this project.